What? Okay, good morning.
Morning.
We are continuing our look at 2 Corinthians. We're in chapter 8, dealing with Christian stewardship. So kind of a fitting text. We talked about that a little bit during the sermon today, especially here, financial stewardship. And I think, Epiphany, you just can't miss it. The two big themes are missions and stewardship, right? We want to get the gospel out to all people, and we want to bring our best to Jesus like the wise men did. And we'll definitely here be focusing on the stewardship part. But as I said, the reason for that is to not just, let's see how big a bank account we can build up, but to use that then to how can we further the gospel message into the world. So one thing I do want to say, so we are going to end at 10:05. I have to start making a hard stop, because we're getting to the word way too late. Some of these, we're getting in there at 10:28, 10:29, so 10:05, we're done wherever we're at, and we can get it.
Sliding into the altar.
Yeah, exactly. I've been embarrassingly late a few times. Not that I don't like our discussion, but with our multi-site, that's just kind of what we got to do. So, all right, if someone wants to read verses 16 through 24, you got it on your sheets here. Roger, thank you.
Thanks be to God who put into the heart of Titus the same concern I have for you. For Titus not only welcomed our appeal, but he is coming to you with much enthusiasm and on his own initiative. And we are sending along with him the brother who is praised by all the churches for his service to the gospel. What is more, he was chosen by the churches to accompany us as we carry the offering, which we administer in order to honor the Lord himself and to show our eagerness to help. We want to avoid any criticism of the way we administer this liberal gift. For we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man. In addition, we are sending with them our brother, who has often proved to us in many ways that he is zealous, and now even more so because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and co-worker among you. As for our brothers, they are representatives of the churches and an honor to Christ. Therefore, show these men the proof of your love and the reason for our pride in you, so that the churches can see it.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the way we handle offerings and, making sure everything is, nothing is secret, or that we'll get to that in a minute. First of all, though, this is a little bit left over from last time, too. What is the difference between giving to a need, like the church budget or debt reduction campaign, versus giving out of love? Is there a time when giving to a certain need can just fall on deaf ears? Talk to me about that concept a little bit. There's a bunch of stuff kind of sewn in there, but Charlie, yeah.
I guess my general thought on it is, when you're giving out of love, you're giving and letting the church distribute it however, you're putting your faith in churches to whatever need they feel is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's other things, and obviously I've been sitting on the stewardship board, you see certain things come up in addition to everyday things that we then specifically ask for donations for. And so it's not necessarily that you're not giving out of love when requested, you were just unaware of maybe additional.
Sure, we did the bathrooms a few years
Right,
back.
and so it just falls, that also too, that kind of falls under love. You're like, hey, because I want to provide a better, properties or missions or whatever, you want to give more because of that love. So to me, the second part of that plays into that first part of the statement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you see an issue if someone, so at the end of each month we refresh it, but each week you have in the bulletin, okay, gifts to the Lord this month, and here's what was budgeted, here's what received, anticipated and actual, and when you see that actual number rising, we're like, okay, they got enough money, I'm going to cut back on my offerings and maybe give to other causes. If the church has, they're $50,000 in the black, should I say, okay, I'm going to turn that faucet down a little bit and then redirect that to somewhere else? What do you think about that? It's one thing if they're in the red and okay, I can, help out with that, but the rare occasion, which I think we are in one of those rare occasions where we're blessed financially right now. So giving toward a budget, that would be like, okay, the budget is good, if you're strictly giving toward the budget.
The problem with that is that the budget was set with givings estimated. And there's always more that needs to be done in God's kingdom. And so if you give based on love, and the budget happens to go $1 million ahead, well, boy, now we can do more. Now we can do more of God's work.
That we didn't budget for. What a blessing to be able to. That would, Trevor, same?
Well, and I don't see an issue with it for two reasons. One, and that's why I think I would encourage individuals to get plugged into the church.
Right.
In one form or another. Because you learn of these things, and to add to what Fred had said, the discussions that are had at the committee meetings or at the church voter meetings are, okay, we be based on actual giving last year, we are increasing our projection for this year, and because we think that's what the giving will be, we're going to base our budget on that. Had we known our giving would be in excess, we could also budget these things. And so that's why being part of discussions and going and being part of boards and being part of the voters meetings and getting that information is very important, so that you can hear those other things, so that when we do add on other pieces, like, hey, we want to give to these other missions or these, we're gonna turn back some money that was initially allocated towards us, that we were blessed to be able to do those things. You understand why, and so then when those other needs also arise, so that my own opinion is, or the other part of that is, I believe, continue to give, because the church will find a way to put those down. I mean, I don't know there's ever been a church or synod situation that they've said, boy, we have just way too much money.
Please
We don't know
stop
what to
giving.
do with it. They're gonna find, I mean, you look at the calls from, on the monthly piece with the synod about kids' education and trying to eliminate their student debt, things like that. There's always something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you put your faith in the church and the boards and everybody to do the right thing and find the best use for those dollars. So.
Which that second point we're gonna get into here in a minute about, transparency and making sure God's people who are giving know what's going on with their money. And, absolutely. Anything else to that, given to the budget for,
Oh, yeah.
or, Mary, okay.
Giving out of love, you give to God, to the church. You're donating your money, but you give it out of love because of what God did for us.
Right. You're giving it to, you're like the wise men, right? You're giving it to Jesus. The
Right.
church is kind of the
And
middleman.
then, if you see the budget and you say, oh my goodness, can I give a little bit more to meet the need of what the church really needs?
Yeah.
Or what the budget really needs?
So hopefully even before you've looked at the budget, you're already cheerfully giving proportionate with your income.
Right.
Not based on what they need, but purely out of my love for Jesus. Here's my number.
Right.
And perhaps, okay, maybe I can, if
And
there's
you
a
go
need,
through
do
your
even a
own
little bit more.
budget
Yeah,
To see
right,
if you can increase it or.
right. Sometimes maybe you have to decrease. You lose your job or something, that's very realistic too, where God doesn't expect you to be unreasonable with your giving, Certainly be faithful with it. When are you gonna?
Same thing.
Okay, I got that one right. Yeah. Is there a time when you can beat the drum too much with a project? Just maybe it's time to say, you know what we got, and then it becomes almost like a negative spiritual thing if you keep asking for something that just isn't happening, or do you just keep asking?
Yes,
You think so, maybe?
yes.
Yeah.
If you harp on it too much, then the focus starts to shift
Yeah,
from the ministry to the money.
to the project or to the money. So I think there's maybe a fine line there where you want to give people chances to give, many chances to give, but there maybe does come a point where if it's been 5 years, 10 years, maybe it's time to move on to a different project. That's just my opinion. We don't want to spiritually harm anyone in this discussion either. All right, well, talking about being transparent and everything kind of above water here with the handling of the offering. Titus had served as Paul's representative in Corinth preparing them for Paul's visit. He'd met Paul in Macedonia, remember that, with the good news that the Corinthians had responded well to his first letter. Now Paul sent Titus back to the Corinthians to continue working with them. He made the 200-mile return trip to Corinth to help them complete their offering of love for the needy Christians in Jerusalem. Why was it important to have respected Christian brothers help with collecting and transporting the offering? You heard that in verse 20. And then in Acts chapter 20, you see some of those names who went with him. Maybe a couple things.
Gave you a lot of Greek names to pronounce there.
Yeah, a lot of Greek names there. Someone wants to take a shot at it. What do you think? Why didn't Titus just take it by himself?
So people didn't think he was insensitive.
Okay, I think that'd be one big one, that you want to make sure we all have a sinful human nature, right? And you got a bunch of cash there, it wouldn't be too hard to grab a coin off the top, and who's gonna, they didn't have the tracking system we have now to, well, now here's what I gave in my checkbook, it doesn't match up with my offering statement at the end of the year, you know. Pretty sure most of the givers in Corinth didn't have that to compare to, so.
Safety.
Okay,
And so because,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're traveling by caravan, it could be robbers.
think of the Good Samaritan parable, right? Yeah, it's dangerous out there, some of those road people traveled on. Anything else? Think there'd be a spiritual reason, not just as far as like the negative, but a positive to get other people involved in this?
It's stewardship of time.
Okay. Okay. I mentioned this with the thing in Alaska, you know, when we helped the SEM student, what a joy to be able to participate in this. Well, any kind of stewardship drive or offering, or I think it's kind of contagious a little bit when you see people giving and then you kind of get excited and you see the results, you know, and I wonder if there might have been a spiritual, let's get a bunch of people involved in this to, it helps, you know, iron sharpens iron when it comes to this. And I'm guessing these brothers who went along with Titus came away refreshed. That look at what God's people have done, and they got to be a part of it. I didn't throw those stats out there just to kill time this morning. You know, when you hear that stuff, man, look at what our offerings have done. And again, it's not to pat ourselves on the back, but all these missions and all these countries, and even in our country, all these Gentiles hearing the good news, because of God, but how He lets us play a part in that with our offerings. And to me, that just is so cool. It's stuff most of you are never going to see. We aren't going to see, you know, so what's going on in some of the, other than seeing the report about it. But then there's stuff that's happened here that other people don't get to see that you've gotten to see. At least we just rejoice that all these new souls who come in and the current souls who are in, that we're already, we're being taken care of.
I think too, skills, I mean, maybe some of these guys were, you know, we have those different areas. We have people who count and they take that serious, and so that they're accurate, and that maybe some of those men that went along also had, you know, they had financial skills that were, you know, I enjoy our stewardship when we get everyone's comes with different perspectives, and sometimes those meetings there's some interesting talks going on about stuff that I just sit there and like, these guys are much smarter at finances and stuff than I am. Like, I just like sit there and listen. I'm like it is good. Those are good meetings that we're talking about. You know, we just don't go there, have breakfast muffin and leave. Like, we're actually talking about how we can use the offerings that we have to spread the gospel. So I just enjoy those meetings, and the men that are there, you know, using their skills and abilities.
You bet. Good. All right, number 3 I kind of talked about, you know, as far as reputations, attitudes affect the attitude of those who are working. It just kind of, when there's enthusiasm, that's going to kind of breed more enthusiasm. I want to ask number 4, and I can maybe, you kind of mentioned it, Sarah, but I'll reword this a little bit. obviously we want to be sure there's no impropriety. There's a reason why two people go to get the offering and take it to the safe, we want to make sure that all is, on the up and up. But do you feel that the church is transparent enough in how the offerings are used? Can we do more to publish the budget? Can we do more to publish the monthly giving statement, or not the giving, how we spend our money, the expense statements? Stewardship sees it, council sees it, but it's not like we put that in the bulletin. You see the main big number. Would you, who don't come to those meetings, like to see more detail, or are you kind of content with what is there?
We post the full detail in the quarterly.
We post it in the voters report.
Yeah.
Yep. So you see it quarterly, if you choose to read the voters report, I guess. The question, could there be more transparency, or are you happy with, I'm asking those who maybe don't come to those meetings, or,
If there's an individual that would like a more detailed account, they could ask you or someone on the council to
Yes.
send them a printout.
it could
of
be printed within 5 minutes. You just go over to the computer and hit the dates you want, and,
As long as we have money in the budget, we trust you.
okay.
Physical money, not
Right.
paper, not it on paper, just
Right,
physical money.
actual money, yeah.
We can pull out of any monthly council report, because it's in
Right.
each, of the moments.
I did see a church one time where they, because sometimes you get that budget and there's just like a lot of numbers and lines and stuff, and for some people, they're like, what's,
It's me.
yeah, and if it just says, if it just says fellowship, like, okay, what's fellowship? But I've seen some churches, they call it a narrative budget, so like they'll have a dollar amount, but then they'll write about, this amount, like we're gonna be putting the windows in this month, like X amount went to the windows, and just a little small write-up about that, but, that's just one way. I just saw a couple churches have done that, where they call it a narrative budget, and there's a picture and a write-up, and then like some people are like, oh, now this makes sense.
Right.
I think too is the ease of which you say we can grab that report. I mean, if you said, oh, well, let me go here, and then I gotta call Jim, and then I gotta call, if it's too many steps, it does make you question.
Sure.
But if you say, oh, I can pull it up in 5 minutes and I can show it, I mean, to me, that is transparency.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, like I call 5 guys and we gotta,
They gotta have a
Yeah.
meeting
Yeah.
first.
Call the Senate committee together
Right.
to make
Right.
to make an action.
I think,
I think we have a lot of, I think we do a good job of having descriptions with the money on the, fairly good versus, I've seen some where, they have the accounting lines even, and it's just like, what are these numbers versus these numbers? And it gets so, if you are in the stewardship board or you're the accountant, you look at that and like, oh, this totally makes sense to me, this is this. But for somebody who isn't like that, I think when we're descriptive like we are, it helps. Yeah, sorry, Fred.
I was just gonna say that, the first couple times I looked at the budget reports and everything, it was like, yeah. Very confusing, you don't know what's what, and even though, like you said, it's spelled out better than others. And I have a background in I take college courses and stuff like that. I hadn't looked at one in like 20 years, but I guess what I'm saying is maybe to add to the transparency, offer an annual, almost like training, how to read it.
Or to tack onto that, could we just create maybe a one-page or double-sided document that's more of a how to read the financial statement? And that could provide maybe just some descriptions of, okay, this is what this is, and maybe that's something that you could even include in the voters packets or something. And my mind probably goes there because I create those kind of documents, but
Right.
that's, I mean.
Yep. Yeah, I think that'd be beneficial. We don't want anyone to think anything shady's going. Yeah, exactly. So if we can describe it better, or whatever it takes to help people understand where their money is going.
Well, I think thankfully we haven't given reason to think that there's.
No,
any
and we haven't. We haven't.
Propriety going.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has ever accused us of that, but,
And just as someone who doesn't come to these meetings,
Yeah,
I just have blind faith that you're doing what you say you're doing. I think most people truly believe and trust in that.
right,
You know what I
Right.
mean?
right.
I mean, if the church building was falling down and the lights were.
Where's all our money going?
Yeah, then that might be a different story.
Right.
Yeah.
I look at those reports at the meetings, both stewardship and council, and give up kind of quickly, because there's so much detail. It's almost like, you're overwhelmed and deterred from trying to understand it and follow the path. But then I also understand that it was mentioned by somebody else, there are so many gentlemen on the stewardship board who totally understand all of this. And I listen to them talk and compare notes about the report, and I get a feeling of, yeah, this is good.
They know what they're doing.
When you hear Justin, Dean, and Ben going back and like cross-talking, it's like,
We are gifted with people who do this work and understand it, and we put our faith in them to some degree, but they convince me every time that I can trust them.
And I think that's part of where we see here, he's sending Titus and these guys that, I mean, they were probably, was Titus good with money? I mean, we don't know, but that wasn't why Paul was training him to be an accountant. He was training him to be a pastor.
Good. Yeah, and verse 21, the reason we're having this discussion, we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of men. So may all our congregations take pains to do what is right when it comes to this topic, because talk about wanting to drive someone out of the church real quick, mess around with money, right? That'll be out of here, right? This is something he's got to be so sensitive about and careful about, so even back in Paul's day. How about 5? The administration of a congregation has nothing to do with spiritual ministry. Agree or disagree?
disagree.
Lynn?
Disagree. If the administration is obviously not good, people aren't going to trust the church, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're kind of the face of the congregation, right? We talked a lot about trust, right, here in the last 10 minutes, and if you don't trust the people in charge, you're gonna have a hard time coming there every week. Yeah. That can affect the congregation real fast.
It's like what you said right before that. If there's impropriety with money, that can turn someone off, not just to that congregation, but to the Christian church as a
To
whole.
Christianity is, in general, yeah, this is how Christians act.
If you look at some of the, to someone, an outsider, like a complete non-Christian outsider, some of these televangelists do far more damage to the church than if they'd have come to it, like to a local Lutheran church or anything, versus seeing the guy on TV stepping off of a Gulfstream.
Because that's what you hear, right? Yeah, they're rich and they have their Rolls Royces and planes, and all they care about is money. And the church has been negatively affected by a lot of those stories, for sure. Well, I'm ready to move on. Chapter 9. Want to do verses 1 through 5? Someone want to read that?
I'll read it.
All right.
Did you say 1 to 5?
1 to 5, yeah.
Okay. There's no need for me to write to you about this service to the Lord's people, for I know your eagerness to help, and I have been boasting about it to the Macedonians, telling them that since last year, you and Achaia were ready to give, and your enthusiasm has stirred most of them to action. But I'm sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you in this matter should not prove hollow, but that you may be ready, as I said you would be. For if any Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to say anything about you, would be ashamed of having been so confident. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to visit you in advance and finish the arrangements for the generous gift you had promised. Then it will be ready as a generous gift, not as one grudgingly given.
All right, beginning of chapter 9 is a very tactful clause construction. Paul's been boasting to the Macedonians about that eagerness. Note how earlier he boasted about the Macedonians doing it to the Corinthians, so things have kind of flipped. he's not gonna beat that dead horse too much, but on the other hand, he knows how bad things had gotten at the church down there. Imagine a similar scenario, factions, lawsuits, sexual misconduct, etc. So the issue, I've been tooting your guys' horn about how great you guys are and how with giving especially, you guys have been doing such a great job. I don't want those people from Macedonia to come down and they see that you haven't been so great. And then they'll make me out to be a liar, and that'll affect the gospel, and it'll certainly have a negative effect on your reputation. And Paul knows kind of the history of the church, right? There definitely were some issues in that church in 1 Corinthians. So it's almost like he's writing and he says, how do you put this? I want to make sure what I'm saying is right. I want to make sure you still have the zeal. I want to make sure you still have the enthusiasm. When Titus gets there, make sure you keep fighting the good fight. Because if you're not, that's going to make all of us look bad. So go ahead.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify, right, exactly. So make sure you guys are still on board with the stewardship train, because I've been telling people you are, so hopefully you still are.
But I'm a little worried.
But you just love, there's another example where this is like real churches, right, with real people who had real problems, and here's another example where Paul knows how sinful people are. Like, I want to make sure, because it's been a while, and make sure you still are as happy as you were to give, because that would be a bad look on all of us if you're not, So that's kind of the setting of this chapter. In verses 1 and 2 then, why does he continually talk about eagerness to help and the joy of giving and eagerness when he speaks about Christian giving? And you see this little story of Lydia there. Where does eagerness and joy come from when we talk about this subject?
It comes from giving out of love in return for what you've been given.
So it starts with what you've been given, right? And if you're not quite getting joy out of that, not understanding it or not appreciating it enough, will your offerings be unnatural? Will there be a ratio there? The more my love for the gospel increases, the more my love for giving back to the Lord. Is that a fair, do you think? They're going to kind of go proportionately, not a dollar amount, but just a heart amount, a joy amount, And some maybe, here's $0 to $1 million, some may be down here, because that's all but some might be up here. But either way, wherever you are on the scale, the more the one increases, the more the other's going to increase, I think. I hope so.
Well, I think it's actual, it's seeing it, it's not just seeing it on paper. If you talk to somebody who's ever done missionary work or done something, a project in another country that can see how dollars have been spent to maybe better a place or to do something, that person's hooked for life on that project or that type of thing. And to be able to see dollars carry through and actually create what they were given for, those individuals will, you talk to any of them, they'll try and do it again. It's very contagious, it's very, like I said, it's an enjoyable experience. People, I can't say I've ever known anyone that's done something like that to come back and be like, cut those people off, I am never doing something like that again. To see the appreciation, to see the project being completed or done or whatever. I would imagine missions too.
Yeah, well, they have, Wells Missions has a list of donors who are just like you're talking about. They love home missions or world missions, and whenever there's an ask, they're going to give to it because they've seen the results or been part of one in the past. And,
right.
They just have such a joy for mission work.
I think others, when others see that joy too, that's why I put that passage from Lydia there. Like she saw Paul, and then like I want to be part of it. Like how do I become part of that? And joyful giving wasn't, grudgingly giving. Like she's like, this is something. How do I support this? How do I become part of that? And you're right, like if somebody comes back and they start talking or even do a presentation on it, someone else might be like, how can I get involved?
They're the best advocates for it.
Yeah.
Hey, I think of what we did in Vietnam here not too far back, and that, I forget what the 2 million, I think, was the ask, and they got it in like 10 months or a year. It was great, a big amount of money, but people just, that hit a nerve in a lot of people. We could start a church training school in Vietnam, of all places. Yeah, absolutely. Where do I sign? You know, how can I give to help that? And they got it, and the thing's being built as we speak, so how cool is that? Yeah, so, you know, you can't force someone to be joyful. I don't know how many times however you choose to give, you know, do you have a big smile on your face when you're writing the check? This is the best part of my life. I'll be honest, sometimes I just do it because you're kind of in the routine. You know, here's what I give, and we've set it aside, and here's the money. We do it at the beginning of the month, and but I think it still comes from a heart of, even if I'm having a bad day, like you give and then you say, I know this is going to go to the work of the Lord, and I know it's going to do good things for the gospel. And so I don't want anyone to feel guilty if I put my check in the offering plate and I don't exactly feel so joyful. I don't feel so guilty about it. Your heart is in the place for the fact that you're doing it. You know, you've set it aside, you've doing it in proportion with your income. It still comes from a joyful place in that you know where it's going and what it's going to do. Because I've had that discussion with people, like, is it wrong? That's why I bring this up. I gave an offering this week and I didn't feel joyful. Not that they didn't feel joyful about the amount. The amount had already been set. But it just, I have something else on my mind. And they almost thought it was like sinning. Because I didn't have an attitude of joy when I gave that. I said, I think you're thinking about that a little too much, you know. I think we all have days where we're up and down. And the fact that you set it aside, you did, you know, that Satan is good like that, to try to get us to feel guilty all the time about it. And that was an example. I think they were overthinking it a little bit. So, anything else on joyful giving? Or there's a balance between patience and eagerness. Satan loves to put out the footrests when things are going well. Patience is a good thing, but be careful of hampering enthusiasm by too much hand-sitting. How and where does a congregation find that balance? So I think maybe part of this is how much is enough to have in the bank.
I was wondering if, because we as a council have kind of struggled with that for the past 6 months since we got that large gift. It's like, wow, we've never had this before. What do we do with
Yeah,
it
I mean,
now?
I got the bank statement. We have $200,000 in the bank. Now, of that,
Not for long.
half of it is designated for things, you know, it's not like half of that has a purpose. There's a whole lot that doesn't. You know, at what point do you say, okay, that's a lot of money? We need to not just, if Judgment Day comes, and I always say, is Jesus going to be like, well, congratulations, you had the most money in the bank. Of all the churches, you guys had 200,000, you guys really
It's
did
like
a
the
good
game
job.
of life. You did-
You win. You get to retire, and so where's the line of, okay, maybe we should put that to work somewhere in that.
Well, I know we had that discussion at Stewardship Board just about, I think, each time it comes up. And I think that's kind of been one of the things we've talked about, and I mentioned earlier, you put in the faith of council and the boards to say, okay, we have this, it's almost a challenge. We've been blessed with this. Now the challenge is, let's go and use it.
And use it, man.
You know, we've been told how to live our lives, and as church, I mean, what to go do and to do these things, and the questions then is, okay, you have faith in the leadership of the church to say, okay, let's use these dollars correctly. And that sometimes that is a challenge because you don't have the infrastructure to do so, but that's something you have to, okay, these are our goals moving forward. Let's try and accomplish these things.
Yeah, good to get feedback. And we do have some bigger ticket property items coming up, so I don't see us having that amount next year at this time, but,
Or next week at this time.
or, yeah, these are going away this
These are
week,
going
so
away
that's
this
gonna be a big ticket item, right?
After,
Yeah, go ahead.
after having been in this church for 50 years, seeing a budget that has a black.
Anything in the black.
red amount is wonderful,
Yeah,
but yeah, it should be used.
yeah,
We can't just sit on it.
right. And I think we all have that same we're not here trying to store up treasures on earth, so. But, so then so what is the dollar amount, is it 3 months or, well, they say for your personal, you're supposed to have 3 months of savings, in case something would happen. And again, there's nothing in scripture that says, here's your guideline, make sure as a church you have this amount in case. So I guess that's sort of
But
a
then
Christian
again,
freedom.
the case is, it's up to God
Right.
whether or not the church stands, and the church is going to stand regardless of whether we're in the black or in the red.
Yeah, so that's where you kind of trust your leaders and trust we all have the same heart. We want to use what we can for the gospel and make sure we're not overspending our means so that all of a sudden a year from now, oops, we did too many things and now we're in the red again. Find that happy medium.
Yeah, you're still on a budget.
Right, exactly.
You know, rich people are on budgets too.
Right. Yep. Yeah, we've talked about like if there would ever be a need for a third called worker, and that's great. Right now, we could afford it for a year or two, but now that's this $80,000 a year price tag that once your surplus goes away, you have to continue to. And I don't know if we're at that point as a congregation where that could be a consistent for the next until Judgment Day afford 3 called workers. But do not fear, as I said, we are going to be spending that here soon. So half of that's probably going away real quick. Anything else on that one? Paul sent out brothers to help the Corinthians get ready for the offering. What can happen if an offering is gathered at the last moment or under a forced situation? Paul says, I don't want these guys to get there and you are like, oh yeah, I was supposed to give. Shoot. Well, let me see how much money I have. How could this have affected adversely Paul's ministry?
Seems a huckster. He's putting these people on the spot. They weren't prepared like he said they were.
Remember back at the beginning of the book, what was the big accusation against Paul?
It's a big talker.
Yeah, you're a fickle. You
Yeah.
say you said you were going to do something, then you didn't. You said you were going to come visit, then you didn't. And the super apostles are, you can't trust this guy. He talks out of both sides of his mouth constantly. And boy, there's sure to be another opportunity for them to accuse Paul of. You said these guys were going to be so eager to give, and we got there, and they didn't even know what you were talking about.
Yeah, and I think too, like they're proper, like we properly plan. I mean, planning goes into this, or anything that you just don't say, hey, we're building on next week.
Yeah, that would be an issue.
Yeah, and everyone like, what? Yeah, well, we need money now.
We've decided to start
And
early
like no one
childhood
knows
center.
about it, that someone would just be like, what? I didn't know anything about this. And now I feel like I need to give, you could just see how that could just be like, I'm like being forced to give something I knew nothing about, and I just don't feel good about this whole thing.
Kind of feel guilty or
Yeah.
mad or
Yeah.
how come I didn't. I know when we started the word process, after a while, like how many more meetings are we going to have? But in hindsight, like it was good. You wanted to make sure everyone had an opportunity to give as much input as they could when they could, and no one at the end of the day could be like, well, I didn't know. No, we for like a year, 2 years, long range planning here's survey and another survey and cottage meetings, and I think everyone who was here would say, okay, I had enough time to give my feedback. And then you take what you got and move forward. But yeah, if you would say, next year, here's what we're doing, that might be a little quick on the
Yeah.
trigger there.
We're having a call meeting in 3 weeks.
Right.
We're a third call worker at the voters meeting.
Don't ask questions, don't worry about it. We got it. Just give us more money. That's all you need to know. The encouragement, verse 3, is for us to be ready to follow those who lead. They're placed by God for our benefit. They may know and see things we don't see and know. Trusting leaders is huge. Is being a church leader an enviable position, and how do we train and encourage new leaders? Clearly, by the amount of people who volunteer, it's not too enviable of a position. Go ahead.
I was gonna say no, and that's what makes it hard to hard to, encourage, because it is maybe harder than it looks from the outside.
It's kind of like politics. You hate to mix the two, but you're serving a vast group of people in your district, right? People who see things differently, who think differently, and you have to kind of represent them all. And there's times, even as you have to put your personal aside and say, okay, here's all of the people I'm representing, and how do we find the best decision that meets everyone's needs in line with Scripture? I think a lot of church leaders, you're kind of the same as any church leader, right? You have to represent the whole group as my board comes to this decision. And that isn't enviable, because sometimes you just have to take it, and you can't really give it back. You might want to say, yeah, but I think this. You say, okay, thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your input. I don't know, other thoughts on that?
Yeah, we had Bible study, I think, with the campus ministry students. We actually talked about Christian leadership. It was last year. It's interesting getting their feedback of, some of them have not had good experiences. One of them said he said something at a voters meeting one time, and like everyone looked at him like, number one, like he said, I felt like I was an idiot. And then one of them, he said an older gentleman came up to him after and said, yeah, we don't need your young opinion or something like that. And he goes, I never want to serve on a church thing, board, or because I just feel like, and it's like, oh my goodness, that was probably not the best training position, helping him, encouraging him to become a new leader. So, it's just interesting, and a lot of them had that kind of not as bad of experience as that, but don't always feel like they can speak up. I don't know if we could, have like a mentorship program or something like that where you would just say, I just don't know where you go to say to younger leaders that have skills and have abilities, how do I get you involved and encourage you to be in this without them thinking these older guys have it handled, so I don't need to be involved.
When things are going well, you don't hear about the leadership, right?
Right.
Kind of like a referee. As a basketball referee, I know I reffed a good game when no one said anything about the referee. You didn't get any comments, okay, I knew I did a good job if I just did my thing. Kind of church council. When things are going well, no one says.
Game when I was coaching?
No.
Okay.
I'm sure you would have said something. But when something's going bad, then you get called out, and that's when so it's tough to serve.
When staff minister was talking about a young person providing their opinion stuff, that made me remind me of something I thought when I was in my 20s and stuff, that the thought came to my mind of, well, how old do you have to be in a leadership position? When are you deemed to have had enough experience to make your opinions worthwhile, so to speak? And I know that there's often the thought of, in our congregation, we're full members when you're in 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So how old do you need to be to then be in a leadership position? And I don't know if that is specifically laid out anywhere, but that might be something that, from like an educational perspective and like trying to build future leaders and stuff, and maybe that's something, I don't know if we talk about any of that type of stuff in confirmation class either. Talk about future, I think you do talk about some future opportunities in serving the church and stuff. But that's a thought that I had. Because all of a sudden, the age popped up upon me sooner than I ever thought it would, saying that, okay, yeah, you're old enough. You can have your, I don't want to say anybody's opinion doesn't matter, but anytime you feel like you need to have a certain amount of experience to be a leader.
Right.
So I don't know, when is enough enough? When are you old enough? Do you have to be 18?
So I think you have to be a voting member, right? So I think you gotta be 18. You're a communicant member after you're confirmed, and I think you have to be 18, I think. Is that right? So you have to be at least 18 to be you can't be on council unless you're a voting member. So 18 would be which I don't know how many 18-year-olds would say they're ready to take on that type of thing.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, that kind of goes back to then the collegiate conversation of,
Right.
yeah, then those experienced people that have tried to voice their opinion and stuff. So it's a very interesting conversation that, be very interesting to have a group of people and get the young person, get that, even if it's a high schooler, 20-something opinion, as well as retirement age opinions and everything in between. I think that'd be a fascinating conversation, but maybe I'm the only one.
No, I agree with you. I do.
Like, more on that is like, I think I've had a similar experience to that, where it's like, well, I wanna serve on church council, but, you know, there's an innate respect for your elders, like the older members of the congregation, you know, like Jim Schultz, that guy knows everything about property maintenance. What am I, I'm gonna manage this guy? This guy knows everything about property. Guys like that in my last congregation, there's people, it's like, you're overwhelmed by their vast experience. And that can be kinda daunting, I think, is that and what you come to understand is that you're not telling them what to do, you're just kind of, okay, this needs to be done, you have any thoughts on that, you're willing to tackle that, and
Yeah, a good leader is just gonna allow the people he's leading or she's leading, to do your thing,
Yeah.
With campus ministry, I'm not a genius when it comes to leading Wells campus ministry, but I have talented people around me who, hey guys, you're more of a facilitator almost, put people in the right position to do their thing, and, yeah, you're not anyone's boss, so to speak.
Well, my own experience, I would say a lot of it too, and I would, anyone listening on Facebook, I would encourage people, remember, just volunteering to be on certain boards and stuff doesn't necessarily put you in the lead role right away. And so I would really, from my experience, I mean, I know when I first joined stewardship, it was a completely different setup. If you look at what we have today versus what it was completely different, and it looked like the Matrix to me when I was trying to read the budget and everything else. And so it's really, part of it is you come onto a board and you know, 80% of it, 90% of it, you'll pick up. I mean, it's really volunteering your time and just lending a hand when asked. And the people around you on that board will very quickly learn what you can and can't do and will mentor you to do so. So they will, I'll say like, John would not give someone who just joined property board, hey, guess what? You go do these things when this person's never had experience doing it. Well, we're very blessed with good board, chairs and good people on the boards that will mentor. And so, I mean, just donating your time, you'll pick that stuff up. Just starting out as part of the board and coming to the meetings, learning certain things, giving your input, asking questions, learning why do we do this versus this? It just, that's where your experience comes from. And you don't necessarily have to jump into that leadership role right away. Sometimes just getting on a board and learning about it, if it's something that interests you. And again, the other people around you, at least my experience when serving on these things, the guys have been fantastic to share information and experiences and how to do things. And if people don't know how, we'll go through it together and do these other things. So it's as much of on-the-job training as anything else. So I would just encourage people, if they're thinking about doing it, just join a board or ask to join a board or something like that. I mean, show interest, and I'm sure there's a spot.
Yeah, and I think what also ties into that is just our general fellowship of, as you get to know each other, you get to learn, you just say, so what do you do for a living? And then they tell you, and then after a while, like, have you ever thought about serving, let's say they're in finance or they're accountant, ever thought about serving on the stewardship board? Or would you like to be a counter or something like that? But matching them up with people that do work, and then just kind of, you make a connection that way, and it's easier then to get them into serving.
I have a question. When was the last time we provided like a list of the common roles and responsibilities, like the different volunteer positions that we have? Like, I mean, there aren't very many people that know, the counting just gets done for a lot of people. They don't necessarily know, they're like, oh, you mean there's people that do that every week? Just thinking about, does the congregation realize all the different opportunities and ways that they could serve? Which kind of also made me think about another point that I know I've kind of had this conversation with other people, but the young population seems to not be as invested. And so it's like, what maybe can we show them that here's all the opportunities to maybe help try to get them to feel like, yes, this is my church and it is my responsibility to also not just attend church, but also to help with the church, to have a sense of ownership. And I don't know if that would help at all, but maybe letting people know here's opportunities that the church has. And even if there may be a role that maybe our volunteers are currently, we have a good number, but you never know. Maybe just people knowing about that opportunity, they could see something that maybe they'd like to learn about it in the future.
Lynn, and then we're gonna take a stop here. I know there was something a few years back, but it wasn't updated, so there is something out there that's old. We could probably update that with the current names, and I think it was like 3-4 years ago.
Are all the boards, who are all run by men at the moment, is that something in our Constitution that says that only men can be on these boards, or can women also join these boards?
No, I would say that as far as the leader of the board, it would be a man thing, but you could be on we have that you're not a voting member of the board, but you can certainly come to the meetings, and yeah, absolutely. You're on child discipleship board technically.
Yeah,
But not a voting member, but adult discipleship, you come to that. I would say you feel like you're a valid member, right?
I was just wondering, because, like the stewardship board or something, the higher up boards, rather than the lesser boards.
I didn't know there was a,
Categorize it,
Number one.
yeah.
or if they get near the top, that's all, top echelon, I mean, secret stuff,
Yeah, no, if someone would have interest, Mary Jeske comes to the stewardship meetings,
Yeah, Mary Jeske comes, yeah.
as the counter, she has a vested interest in what's going on. She doesn't say much, but she comes, happy to come. All right, mental note on that, I think that is a good idea, to put that list out. I remember it was like a 1 or 2 page document that had all the different stuff that goes on that how many people don't even realize.
I'll have it on the council.
Yeah, let's get that on the council agenda, good. All right, pick this up next week. We'll close with the benediction. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen. Okay,